Hello, Society members and our viewers from around the world. My name is Charles Knippen. I'm the president of the National Society of Leadership and Success, and I'm happy to be hosting another Thought Leader Series episode with you today. During this series, we sit down with thought leaders from around the world to learn their stories, but to also give them an opportunity to share their tips for success. And our leader joining us today started her career as a criminal attorney in 1979, and in 1981, she joined the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, overseeing several high-profile cases, including the O.J. Simpson trial. At that point, she began a new career in her life as a best-selling author and as a frequent contributor to national television shows, including CNN, MSNBC, Today, Good Morning America, and as a legal correspondent for Entertainment Tonight. I'm very happy to be welcoming Ms. Marcia Clark.
Hi.
Marcia, thank you for being here with us today. Marcia, as I mentioned in the Thought Leaders series, the most important part is getting your story out, because we have leaders from around the world who are just starting their journey. But with all the accomplishments that you've had in your life, I'd like to ask you to go back to that time when you were a student and to kind of walk us through that journey, your professional journey from being a student to where you are today, a couple of the major milestones and things that were important to you in navigating to where you are.
It's a bumpy, kind of very non-linear road. and maybe it's maybe a really good thing to say, because my younger son, he's now 24, but when he was in college, he was really freaked out about what am I going to be, and I'm going to choose a career path, and then what if I don't like it? You know, what if I have to change? And the thing that I would tell him, as I would say to all of your members of the society, don't worry about that. Change is good. Change is inevitable. So here's the example, my life. So I started out when I was a kid, really being addicted to crime. That's one thing that never changed. And I mean 4 or 5 years old, addicted to crime. It was crazy, yeah, it's not good. Anyway, but I loved crime fiction, I loved reading it, I loved Nancy Drew, and I wanted to write crime fiction at one time. And then I thought I would be an actress for a while. That was through my teen years. When I got into college, I realized that that might not be the best way to earn a living, or I mean, a certain way of earning a living, and I like to live indoors. So I changed my mind and decided to become a poli-sci major, and thought I would like to work in the Foreign Office in the State Department. At that time, I spoke a few languages, and I thought, you know, that would be a great career. So I specialized in international relations and focused on the Middle East. But when I graduated and applied to the State Department, they were not keen on having females in the field. They asked if I could type. So much for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to think about, what else do I want to do? And I just did a variety of odd jobs for about a year while I kind of tried to figure out what I wanted to be, and then decided I'd go to law school. And so from the very beginning of law school, I knew that my specialization was going to be criminal law. That, not a shock, right? Mm-hmm. But I started out as a criminal defense lawyer, and I had no intention, none, of working for the man. Yeah, no, I was going to be a defense lawyer, and that's so I clerked for 2 years, and then I worked for 2 years as an associate, and ultimately decided to become a prosecutor when I started handling violent crime. It was one thing to defend, you know, when I was handling dope cases and that kind of thing, prostitution cases, but when it came to handling murder cases, that's when I thought, you know, I really want to take care of the victims. So I became a prosecutor. And I really loved it, and I thought I was going to be a prosecutor. I thought they were going to carry me out in a pine box. That was my plan. And it did not work out that way. So after the trial, the day of the verdict, I walked out of the courthouse and I never went back. And I had lost faith. I couldn't, you know, I had seen too much that was ugly and untenable, and I just, I guess you could say I lost my belief, I lost my faith, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I went out, I wrote a book about the trial. I collaborated with Teresa Carpenter, who was a phenomenal writer, Pulitzer Prize winner. She was just great. And then I did a bunch of television things. I did a speaking tour, lecture tour for a couple of years around the United States and Canada and Puerto Rico, speaking about domestic violence and about the trial, about public careers, a career in government, that kind of thing. and then did a lot of television commentary. Hosted for CNBC. I was the substitute host for Rivera, Geraldo Rivera. You know, hosted some shows for MSNBC, and that led me into becoming a consultant for a 1-hour drama on Lifetime called For the People, a scripted show. And I started writing scripts. When that show went down, I went out with the creator of that show, and we wrote pilots together and sold a few to networks. And that's when I thought, you know, I always wanted to write crime fiction. I guess if I'm ever going to realize a childhood dream, it's going to be now. And so I started to write the Rachel Knight series based on a prosecutor in Los Angeles. I wrote 4 of those. But then I wanted to, I'm practicing law from the defense side again as an appeals lawyer. So I handle court-appointed appeals for the indigent. In California, if you're convicted of a felony and you can't afford a lawyer on appeal, which most can't by then because they spend their money on the trial lawyers, understandably, and once they're convicted they don't have the money to afford to pay for a lawyer to handle their direct appeal. So the court appoints lawyers to do it. So I do that work for the indigent. And then I decided, you know what, I've been a defense attorney now for almost as long as I've been a prosecutor. I'd like to show the other side of counsel table, the other side of the courtroom. So Blood Defense is all about a criminal defense lawyer, Samantha Brinkman.
Okay.
And that brings you up to
yes,
today.
and I would love to jump right into that because you created this whole new world, this whole new character. So if you could tell us a little bit about the book, but also kind of the creative process, because for our students right now who are kind of creating their own lives, you know, what goes into that process as far as creating a whole new world, and how do you personally get kind of impacted and pulled into that?
So, let's see. Well, what happened with Samantha is I had finished the 4th Rachel Knight novel, and I wanted to do something different. There are certain constraints when you write about a prosecutor. They're supposed to be ethical, you know, and all that, and that I was a little tired of that. I wanted to stretch the bound.
Okay.
Yeah, that's enough of that ethical stuff. Yeah. And I wanted to write a character who was more twisted, a little darker, somebody who would be willing to push the envelope or even explode the envelope. I wanted somebody who was more bizarre. So that was one thing. But I was thinking about writing actually a standalone. I wasn't thinking about writing another series at all. Okay. And I went through a number of ideas, and I went here and I went there with it, and I started this book and I started that book, and nothing was really taking hold. And then, like, just one day, Samantha just kind of showed up. And like, what about me? Oh, what about you? And so Samantha Brinkman was born. And then I built out the characters around her. And then I thought of, okay, so I had to think of what kind of story can I tell to tell people what it's like to be a criminal defense lawyer in today's world, with media the way it is, Twitter, Facebook, and everything, and the cable news pundits, you know, that talk about. I wanted to weave it all together to show the way law is practiced now, as well as a story that will allow me to explore the character and show the world who Samantha is. So I came up in Blood Defense with, she was a public defender, Samantha was. She went out into private practice, and now she's got to make some money, generate big business. Her paralegal, who was also her childhood best friend, is working for her and hasn't been paid in 2 months when we opened Blood Defense. And she has an investigator that she brings on board in the beginning of the story, who is a former client. He's a hacker, and he got busted for basically appropriating 2 BMWs at the dealership where he was working. And he was so good at it that they made him a deal. Samantha got them to make him a deal in return for showing how he did it. So that's her little trio. And then this case happens where a veteran detective on LAPD is charged with murdering 2 girls, one of whom he was dating, a young actress, on the brink of rediscovering her early childhood fame, and was pulling herself up into the spotlight again. And she was a beloved actress, and she and her roommate are found murdered. He's the suspect. Samantha doesn't want to go for the case, even though it's a high-profile case that could probably really help her business, because she hates cops. She doesn't want to defend one. And her paralegal, her friend Michelle, says, you got to go and get that case because you haven't paid me in 2 months. So Samantha does wind up with it. But I show her in the very beginning, she's on a cable news show, and she's, you know, using these, like young lawyers do, to make a name for herself, so that people get to know who she is. She becomes a big wheel in the community. That's one of the efforts that you do make. And she's on Twitter, so while she's waiting for her shot, she's on Twitter, and I show what it's like with that. So I try to incorporate what's really going on in the world today with a criminal case.
And there's so much that goes into that. How do you even get into that creative space? You know, when you're trying to create a whole world, what suggestions or tips do you have, you know, for our aspiring writers, but for anybody who is really looking at that creative space?
You know, I guess I really do draw on my own life experience. You know, I've handled thousands of cases, and in the course of that met thousands of defendants and witnesses and lawyers, and so, I mean, I don't consciously try to, oh, I'm going to redo this case or that case, because the truth is that regular cases are not that interesting. Regular cases are really pretty slam dunk, open and shut, you know. Charlie goes into the liquor store and shoots the clerk. Done. You know, that's not going to go very far. So I think about what crime intrigues me, what have I heard recently, and just I just kind of walk around and talk to myself about, which is a strange thing to see.
We all do it.
Yeah. Especially when I'm telling myself, no, that won't work. So, you know, I think I just kind of draw from everything, but mostly I start with what's intriguing me right now. You know, what situation is interesting to me, and I think about all the news stories I've read, cases I've handled, books I've read. You know, you just kind of pull it from everywhere.
And so that experience, you know, drawing that inspiration from that, for our students watching this, they're wondering, how do I get that experience? And so in your own life, in having so many different courses that you know, kind of went down different paths that you went down, what suggestions do you have for our students as far as running out there and getting that experience?
I think you just have to follow your passion. You have to do what you love, you know, and if you're doing a job just for the money, you're ultimately not going to be happy. So, you know, I'm not saying don't try to get paid. It's always a good idea. But what you want to do is try and marry the two and go for something that you really believe in. When I left criminal defense work, I was in private practice, and I took a big cut in pay to join the prosecutor's office, but I was much happier because I was doing what I wanted to do. And I think if you follow your passion and what you really love to do, you'll get that experience.
So that's a great transition, because you really did have an entire career, and that you looked over the edge and looked over the cliff and said, I'm going to jump and I'm going to try something new. And I'm wondering, was there any self-doubt for you in that? And for our students who are watching, what helped you get through, if there was?
I wrote a few books before I got one published. By no means did my first effort wind up on anybody's shelf, as well it shouldn't have. So, but it was a very scary thing when I finally did get published, because now people are going to read and judge and criticize, and, you know, what if it doesn't make it, and what if people don't like it? You know, but at the end of the day, that's what life's about. Life's about taking risks, you know, taking those leaps. And if you know, my motto is always give it 110%. Whatever you do it all the way, and don't leave anything on the table. Because then the one thing you know for sure is you can tell yourself, I gave it all I had, you know, and when you do that, you don't have any regrets. So, and that's what I do. I mean, I always hope that every book that I write is better than the last, because I hope I'm always improving. But in that book, I'm always giving it my best, and that's all you ever can do. So that's how you quell the self-doubt. You don't quell it. You know, it's always going to be there, I think. I mean, at least it is for me. But I always, you know, but I'm giving it my best shot, and hopefully people like it.
Gotcha. And, you know, you had referenced a little bit earlier about what got you to that point of looking over the edge and quelling that fear and saying, I'm going to do it. You know, what is it that pushed you so far that you just said, you know what, this causes me to make a change in my life? And, you know, what suggestions would you have for our students who are watching, who are just kind of frustrated in their own lives? And, you know, at what point do you set that mark for yourself where you go, I can't be pushed any further, I need to try something new?
Right. You want to give everything a try, a fair try. If you're in a job that that isn't working out, you're not liking it, if you've been there for a year and you're not liking it, you must definitely go. You know, you've given it more than a fair shot. But if you've been there 2 months, you might want to think twice about giving it another try, because you never know. You might wind up finding things about it that you really love. But once you get to the point where you can tell, I'm not happy, I'm not doing what I want to do with my life, this isn't fulfilling to me, that's when you really have to find out what would be fulfilling, and make the change, take the risk, and get into something that at least appears to be good. And don't worry about the fact that these changes happen and you're taking these risks. That's what life's about, especially when you're young,
And so, going back and, again, the entire space of your career, it's been one big pressure cooker. You have put yourself in, as being a trial lawyer, in terms of writing books, being on national television, that's a lot of stress. And, for a lot of our students right now, they have the stress of full-time classes, full-time job, maybe families. For our non-traditional students, a lot of stress in their own lives. And
not to mention student loans.
Student loans, absolutely. And so, with all the stress that you've had in those different situations, what are the best coping mechanisms that you've had? And, what suggestions would you have for our students?
Oh, great question. Stress. Everybody has it. I think, you do have to find physical activity that you can do. That's really important. Whatever it is, whether biking, swimming, yoga, whatever it is, do something and do it regularly, because that is a known stress reliever. If you can meditate, do that. 10 minutes a day is enough to make the difference. It's really very helpful. So you want to create that kind of balance in your life, and it's like, I'm so guilty of it myself. I used to meditate a lot, and did yoga, and now I have the worst excuse of all: I'm too busy. That's just terrible. So, but I'm going back to it because that is, I certainly do go to the gym 5 days a week. So that kind of balance is really important, and try not to angst over what you're doing. Do your best, and then let it go. And move on without looking back. I think a lot of people waste energy and build stress by looking back with regrets about what I should have done, what I could have done. Don't do that. It's over. It's past. It's done. Think about what you're doing right now and do the best you can with that, what's right in front of you. And I think that's stress relieving too. And,
and on this journey that you're having, again, as a case trial lawyer, as an author, as a contributor, there's people that are surrounding you. And I want to know, for our viewers, what have you learned about those people surrounding you, the importance of them, but then also some of the life lessons around that, about that support, and how you can best utilize that along the path?
Friends are super important, really super important. And family, of course. It depends. Not everyone has a loving, supportive family. So those who do, that's a great place to reach out. Loving, supportive friends, a great place to reach out. And talk and share and be open with them, and let them support you, and let them give you that atta-girl, atta-boy, Really important to be able to talk to people and connect with them, because that's another stress reliever, by the way. It's having that kind of, it again comes back to balance in your life. You have to have a little time to have a good time, and sharing time where you can talk to your friends, unwind, and cry on their shoulder if you need to. Yeah.
And what about the professional network? Because for a lot of our students, they're trying to figure out right now, they know where they want to go potentially, but how do they build that professional network to get there? And so as far as how you utilize that professional network for support, because that's a different conversation than what you have with your family or with your friends, how did that professional network play a part in your professional journey?
So, writing is a very solitary experience. Ultimately, the support you get is after you sell your book to a publisher. But then, you have this wonderful support network, like I do right now with Thomas and Mercer. They're phenomenal. So you have an editor, you have a copy editor, and you have publicists, you have all these people who help you get your book out and make it the best it can be, get it out to the world, and sell to people, and you have to network with them too. It's important to establish a good relationship, if you can, with the people you work with. Just because it's human, people will want to work with you and will want to work for you and do better things if they like you.
One of the other topics that frequently comes up in society today is the role of gender in terms of opportunity. And you've been an outspoken advocate, as far as women and their right, their place to, not only earn a fair wage, but then also in terms of being a leader, in terms of opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been from putting yourself into the district attorney's office in 1981 to today, and how you've seen that evolve?
So when I joined the DA's office, there were very few women. And I never thought about it, to tell you the truth. I didn't think, oh, there's very few women. But, you know, I've had a chance to look back and see. So on the 18th floor of the criminal courts building, just to give you some idea, there were 3 men's bathrooms and 1 women's bathroom. And these floors are huge. I mean, there's like 200 offices. So that tells you. Yeah. And going into court, being the only woman in court, that was true for many, many years. Very common thing. Was there sexism? Of course there was, all the time. And the problem back then was, if you called anybody on it, you were a whiner. It was a lame excuse. It was never viewed with, you know, girls, we women could talk about it with each other, but to call out a judge or, you know, or a defense lawyer for being sexist, it was never taken seriously, and it was actually viewed as a sign of weakness, you know. I think things have changed, not completely, but they're better than they were, and now people are more openly discussing sexist behavior for women who are, particularly women who are handling roles that were traditionally thought of as male roles. Though I don't know why they were, because, you know, I mean, I understand if it requires weightlifting, but most lawyers don't really have to worry about weightlifting. So how to handle that? I think that you have to, as a woman, not see gender to a certain degree. You have to go in without preconceptions, and don't assume that all men are going to treat you in a sexist manner, and don't assume that every time you get dissed it's because they're being sexist. Sometimes, you know, women can be too sexist. So, you know, so to try to go in with an open mind and assume until people prove otherwise that you're being treated fairly until you're shown that you're not. At that time, you just have to hold your own in space. You really do have to not get dragged down about it, not get dragged down by it, and don't let people minimize you, shrink you, or make you change, you know, speak in a softer voice or be afraid to speak up. You've got to be able to hold your own and voice an opinion, and don't let them get you down. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to call people out, oh, you're a sexist pig, that kind of thing. Very frequently that's counterproductive. You know, it's not going to help. But what you can do is simply show that you're not daunted by it.
Very real feedback and thoughts for our members. Thank you for that.
Sure.
As far as your legacy, I want to transition to, you know, you've done so much in your career and you've accomplished so much. What do you want your legacy to be? Is it to be known as the, you know, trial attorney, the O.J. Simpson lawyer, or, you know, is it as the author? What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't know that I think in terms of having a legacy. A legacy is something that other people decide about you. I think about having a life. What people decide about me is going to be up to them, and I can't tell them what to think. You know, I was a trial lawyer. I did try the Simpson case. I'm now an author and a defense lawyer. I mean, I'm living my life, and I'm doing what I do. I think it's going to be up to others to decide what my legacy is.
Second to the last question for you. We have a whole world full of leaders watching this. What tips would you give them? If you could break down 2 or 3 tips that you'd say, you know, from my learning, from all the experiences that you've had, what are 2 or 3 things that you would suggest to our leaders? Number
1 thing, listen to your gut.
Yeah.
Listen to your gut. Your gut instinct will tell you what's right, what's wrong, what you really love to do, and what you're just telling yourself you love to do. Number 2 thing, do what you love to do. You know, find your passion and go for it. Even if it's hard, it seems daunting, go for it. And whatever steps go along the way, I mean, you may not get to that dream job right away. Just try to put your feet on the path that will ultimately lead to that dream job. And lastly, don't leave anything on the table. Whatever you do, do it 100%.
Perfect. And the last question for you, for our members who are watching and, you know, they're wondering what's next for you. And, you know, what's the next step for you as a leader, as a thought leader, as, you know, a successful person? What's the journey ahead?
I don't know. That's the wonderful thing. I mean, really, it's to live in the mystery. I mean, I can tell you right now that I'm writing novels and handling court-appointed appeals and doing some television appearances, and that's what I'm doing. Tomorrow, Who knows?
All right, that shall be determined. Well, Marcia, I want to thank you for joining us here today. And on behalf of the National Society of Leadership and Success, I want to present you as an honorary member of the Society now. You join 600,000 other members across the country, and we want to thank you for being here with us.
Such an honor. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, to our leaders and our viewers watching today, we hope that you enjoyed our time with Marcia, and we hope that you have an opportunity to learn from her and her experiences, and we hope that you make a successful step on your own journey on being a leader who makes a better world. Thanks for joining us.